inequality is a feminist issue. More women suffer than men from income inequality. That's because more women are lower paid workers. If there's going to be a large gap between men and women make less, then women are going to suffer more from making less. It's just like, it's kind of hard when you think about it. When a lot of people think about what's the gender gap, you think that there's just a distinct difference between men and women. That's true, but the worst part is that women just at the end of the day end up making a lot less money. So when low-income workers lose their jobs, then a bunch of women are unemployed. So next slide, please. So this is important right now because, as I mentioned, a whole bunch of low-income workers are going to be losing their jobs because of COVID-19. 60% of minimum wage workers in Virginia are women, and more women have lost their jobs. And when you lose your job because of lockdown, when you try to go back to your job, you're going to have lost experience time, career time, hours worked. And so when they're looking at raises or moving up in your career, women are going to be more likely to not qualify for those positions. So even after lockdown ends and everybody goes back to their jobs, men's wages will return back to what they were before lockdown a lot faster than women, which also means when it comes time to retire, men will be able to retire faster and women will have to keep working longer. And so this is now going to be an issue that's not just going to end when lockdown ends. In a year from now, wages are not going to return, and this is going to be an issue that women are facing for the next lifetime if we don't make sure that we start putting in policies to bounce them back up from how hard they've been hit. Next slide, please. So if you want to understand why women are lower income jobs, why there is this wage gap, I outlined 4 questions that I think are the most important for understanding women's current role in the overall labor force. So you have to understand, why are women the majority of low-income workers? Why have more women lost their jobs from lockdown? What long-term effects will women face? And then what does this mean for overall gender equality? I think if you can get just a quick answer to these 4 questions, you can really understand why we need to step in and fix this problem. So could you go to the next slide, Stair, please? So the first question is, it seems to have missed one.
I think she missed one. One back.
There it is.
There you go.
There it is. There.
Okay, cool. So why are women the majority of low-income workers? If you look at this graph here, this is on the y-axis, there's a percentage of workers, and then the x-axis is years from 1979 to 2013. And it's showing that the gender gap, the pay gap between the two sexes is decreasing, but it's still very much prominent. This gap is specifically showing how many of the federal minimum wage workers, I don't know where the slide just went, but the graph was showing the federal minimum wage workers, what percentage of them were men versus what percentage of them were women. And if you saw, more minimum wage workers were women. And there's 3 main reasons for this. The first is women are seen as natural caregivers, as being a very maternal figure. So when you are working in some sort of field like teaching, nursing, retail, these very face-to-face sort of jobs, because women are like naturally seen as more equipped to those jobs, the value in being a good face-to-face person is then decreased. So when you're pricing jobs, for example, teaching, if you compare people with similar degrees in teaching fields versus non-teaching fields with the same level of work experience and jobs, teachers are paid less. And that's an extremely female-dominated field because the skill in being a good teacher is seen almost as like a natural feminine trait when it should be valued just as much as another trait. So historically, these very female-dominated positions have been underpaid because of these sort of roles of the sexes. A second reason why women are the majority of low-income workers is in high, like, C-suite organizations and big companies, the idea that you can work long hours, you can show up to the office whenever needed, you can grind through the night, these very hard-working ideals don't fit with having children. If you need to pick up your kid from school, you can't also be at the office from 9 to 9. So you can't, even if a woman had the same sort of job, if she's also asked to take care of her children, no matter how many hours she can work, she needs them to be at a different time. She needs to have more flexibility with her schedule. And that just goes against what's been built as this traditional idea of work. The third and final, I think most prominent reason is the broken rung in corporate promotions. So a lot of people think that women just don't get promoted at the same rate, which is very much true. But the bigger issue is that women don't get promoted to first-tier managers. After you become a manager, the chance that you'll be promoted above that in traditional fields is lower than men, but not extremely lower. But the chance that a woman will be promoted to just a first-tier manager, that's the biggest hurdle a woman has to face. Just getting that first promotion. And so a lot of corporations are starting to implement policy to help address that, but it's still very much an issue. And when some studies were done by the McKinsey Institute about what predicts employee satisfaction, the idea that sorry, I just lost my train of thought. The idea that workers have equal opportunity is the biggest prediction to employee satisfaction. So the idea that women should be able to be promoted at the same rate as men is a benefit for everybody, not just women. So can you do the next slide, please? So I want to break down one example of where women are isolating. There's a trend where women are isolating in careers that are just paid less. Sarah, if you could just hit next, I have the bullet points to come up. So there's these section of jobs called middle skilled jobs, and they're jobs that require more than a diploma and less than a college degree. Next, please. So 53% of the American workforce fits into this idea of middle skilled jobs. Can you just keep clicking to add the next one? Yeah. Only 43% of the current people that are being trained for work are training to become middle skilled jobs. So there's this huge gap where these employees are going to be needed and they're not going to be trained. And so that means this is such a great opportunity for women to start taking over these fields, especially because 55% of middle skilled workers are women. But 83% of those women who are middle skilled workers make less than $30,000 yearly. And this is 53% of the workforce. So because the median salary is $27,000 versus the median male salary is $44,000. This is because women in middle skilled work are sticking to jobs like cosmetology, retail, versus things like welding, advanced information technology like hardware repair, jobs like that. And that's because one of the biggest leading factors of why women are not going into these jobs is either because teachers are skewing them away from them, or they're scared of workplace harassment. So like the automotive repair industry, a large percentage of women don't want to enter this field because they're scared of physical and emotional harassment in the workplace. So that's setting aside policy. That's just something we all need to address in ourselves. Next slide, please. So why have more women lost their jobs from lockdown? So low income and in-person jobs are harder to switch digitally, just from the nature of why this recession is hitting. If you have a job that is, mostly online, you're mostly a CEO, most of your calls or your work was already doing remote calls, it's so much easier to switch online versus a maid whose job is in person by nature of it. And that's not something anybody could have predicted getting their jobs. But if you look at this graph right here, it's showing that the biggest industries that have been hit the hardest from lockdown are leisure and hospitality, and teaching and educational health services. And those are female-dominated fields. So low-income female-dominated fields are going to be hit the hardest. Additionally, more children, households, and there's more sick people. which women are, just because of social norms, more likely to have to take the responsibility for. But at the same time, if you already picked a job where your work was very flexible, just for economic reasons, the idea that you're the person in the household that should quit your job to take care of the children makes sense for everybody. But that comes from years of being more likely to pick a job that is more flexible. Next slide, please. So these two final questions. What long-term lockdown effects will women face, and what could this mean for gender inequality? So women taking time off will lead to longer-term income disparities. If you have to quit your job, you then have to go back into the workforce at a disadvantage. And additionally, forcing women back into traditional roles of motherhood is they're going to lose a lot of their economic independence and security, which has been one of the biggest reasons for stopping gender inequality. The fact that women at such a high rate go to college is what is leading them to be a lot more independent and economically secure, and taking that away is going to have big issues for the culture of work, the stereotypes of women, the concept of motherhood, and we just all need to be really self-aware about why there are these differences. So I'm going to pass it off to Ralph, and we're going to talk about, can you do the next slide, please? So here we've outlined the main 8 steps to reducing inequality, and we're going to break down these different proposals. Some of them are going to have to just do with fighting inequality between lower income and upper income workers, and some of them are going to have to do specifically targeting problems that hit women more than men. But because women are the majority of low income workers, helping low income workers will disproportionately help women because they've been disproportionately hit harder. So go ahead, Ralph.
Okay, before I start, I just want to say one thing, a little story about Emily. I've never formally met Emily. We met in a Zoom session with Stair where we agreed to do this together. After that session, I sent Emily an email saying, why don't we talk on Tuesday morning about getting together and figuring out how to do this? And I got an email back that said, well, Tuesday morning doesn't work for me because I'm taking an advanced placement test in microeconomics. And I started thinking, gee, between my freshman and sophomore year in high school, I was worried about tests too, the test to get my driver's license. I flunked both the written test and the driving test. You might want to keep that in mind if you ever want to ask me for a ride anywhere. Okay, here are the eight items. Some of these are more important than others. Some are more applicable to women than others. Raise the minimum wage, reform the tax system, make it more progressive, enact sick care, paid sick care, provide affordable health care, increase workforce housing, make available low cost for free legal assistance, ensure quality public education, and enforce civil rights laws. Next slide, please. The most important way to attack poverty is to pay people more. And we made great progress this year in the Virginia legislature. The federal minimum wage since 2009 has been $7.25 an hour. And about 40% of the states still have that, and as does Virginia. Now, the Virginia minimum wage is going to raise to $12 an hour by 2023. And the proposal is to increase it to $15 by 2026. Looking at how much a minimum wage gets you, at $7.25 an hour, if you work 50 weeks a year, 40 hours a week, and I'm counting no paid vacation because the kind of people that make minimum wage don't get benefits. Okay, so that would get you, $7.25 would give you $14,500. When we get up to $12 an hour, that will give you an annual income of $24,000. And when you reach $15, you can make $30,000 a year. Now, the poverty threshold for a family of 4 is $26,200. So the $12 that we're going to you won't even get you a wage above the poverty level. And when we get to $15 an hour, we will be about $4,000 above the minimum wage for minimum income for somebody in poverty. So by raising the minimum wage to $15, we're not going to be creating a lot of millionaires. We're going to be able to raise people just a little bit over the poverty level. Now, just as a comparison between, and this is where the income inequality is getting bigger. So from 2009 to 2010, the Virginia minimum wage increase has not increased at all, 0% increase. Now we know that for over 80% of the stock in this company, the stock shares that are traded on in Wall Street and other places, are owned by the top 10% of the people in the country. The Dow Jones Industrial Average has gone up 145% since the minimum wage of $7.25 was enacted in 2009. So minimum wage still the same for most of the country, including Virginia until next year. Dow Jones Industrial Average has gone up 145%. Now, what we need to do in the legislature when they meet next year is, first of all, no backsliding on the time that the minimum wage increase takes place. There was some, we changed it from January 1st to May 1st. That was pushed back, the first increase up to $9. No more backsliding. We have to make sure the $15 is enacted into law, not just proposed. Now, there's a feminine part to the minimum wage. It used to be that domestic workers could be paid even less than $7.25. That was, they were excluded from minimum wage legislation. Also students. Those two exclusions have been eliminated. So students and domestic workers will have to be paid the minimum wage in the future. The only group that still is excluded from coverage by the minimum wage are farm workers. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, I think I already made these points, so we can go to the after that. This is the most startling thing I've run into in doing all the research on this topic. The share of family income that goes to pay state and local taxes in Virginia, divided into the lowest 20% of the people, second, the third, the fourth, and the top 20% is divided into 3 subgroups. What this shows basically is that we have a regressive tax system. The lowest paid people, the people with the lowest income in the United States, below $22,000, pay an average of 9.8% of their income for state and local taxes. As opposed to the top 1%, way down at the bottom, they only pay 7% of their income in taxes. That's because the state of Virginia has a number of regressive taxes. The gas tax, for example, is a good example. Well, you say everybody pays the gas tax. Everybody pays the same amount. Well, rich people spend a lot less of their time paying the gas tax than poor people and lower middle class people do, which means that the poor and lower middle class people spend a lot higher percentage of their income on the gas tax than the rich. The same is true for sales tax. The same is true for any fee that everybody pays. It is more difficult for the poor people to pay it because they have a lower income than for the rich people. Okay, next slide. Thank you. Here's 3 ideas for lowering the rates of poverty, lowering the rates of taxes for the poor people. The first is to raise the standard deduction from $5,000 to $10,000. Let's compare families with a $20,000 income with a family of $200,000 income. If you increase the standard deduction, and there's one person in this family that we're using as an example, it cuts the money that they pay taxes on from $15,000 to $10,000. That's an enormous drop. For a person that makes $200,000, it would cut the amount of tax on which they pay taxes from 190,000 to oh, that's wrong. It should be from 195,000 to 190,000. In other words, 5,000 less that you pay taxes on. No big deal if you're making $200,000, but that makes a huge impact on the lower class person. This is an idea that was pushed by Vivian Watts with other people in the legislature, but she didn't get around to introducing it because she had a lot of other things to do. So this is something that's been talked about. Second, fully fund the earned income tax credit. By funding the tax credit, if you can't use all the tax credit to lower your taxes, the state gives you a refund for the amount of taxes. This is particularly important for people that have an impact of less than $40,000. The credit, goes away above that limit. Delegate Plum has been pushing this for years in the legislature, and we hope one of these years he makes it. Another one is to enact a state tax, which is assessed on deceased individuals' assets when they die, like cash, securities, business interests, etc. And you usually exclude the amount of money that's passed on to their nearest relatives or gifts to charities. We used to have an estate tax. This isn't talked about by many people down in Richmond, except the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy. They have pushed an enactment of estate tax. So all three of these ideas are not something that I just dreamed up or it's way beyond anybody's comprehension. They've all been proposed and talked about, and nothing's happened. Okay, let's go to the next one. Next slide, please. Okay, currently the Virginia income tax rates are, as you see here, and it goes up. The highest rate is 5.75% for anybody with an income over $17,000. What this means is, if you make $12 an hour, only $24,000 a year, your marginal tax rate is the same as a millionaire. Now that's ridiculous. This is I don't know where they came up with these rates, but it had me a long, long time ago when people didn't make much money. Now, if you make a measly $12 an hour, you pay a marginal tax rate as a millionaire. So this is a solution that I dreamed up. This raising higher tax rates on the upper classes is not something that I think has been discussed a lot in Richmond, but I'm sure the Institute for Fiscal Analysis could come up with some estimates on how this could work. But it seems to me if you could keep the 5% raise up to $50,000 income, have a 6% raise for incomes between $50,000 and $116,000, and then 7% above that for all higher incomes. This would make our tax system more progressive. The whole idea of progressive during the progressive period, when they started talking about progressive legislation, the main thing they did was have a federal income tax where the rich paid more. That's a progressive tax. And ours, where women making $12 an hour paying the same tax as millionaires, kind of ridiculous. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, now I'm turning this back to Emily to hear more about some of the ideas for dealing with income inequality, particularly as it relates to women. Emily?
Okay, so before I cut in on that one quick, I just want to address the Q&A. If you guys at any point when we're presenting want to put questions into the Q&A, it's a little bit easier to look through than the chat. But there's two of them, and I just typed answers while Ralph was talking, if you want to look at those. But now I'm going to talk about paid maternity leave and affordable childcare. So as I mentioned earlier, some of the busiest reasons, the big difference between men and women is that women give birth. And so they get a lot of responsibility for children, especially they need to recover after giving birth. And also they breastfeed. There's a lot of factors why women, especially for infancy, need to be present in a child's, not need to, but most commonly are present in a child's life. So, and those lead to different disadvantages in the workforce, which means addressing those disadvantages will help women have more inequality in the workforce. So the two biggest things are paid maternity leave and affordable childcare. Next slide, please. So first, I want to just put where the US is on for both of these factors in terms of the rest of the world. So we can see what is like radical policy and what is what most countries have. So this chart right here is a graph of how many paid at a portion of your income weeks off can you get after either adopting a child or after childbirth. And these are just for the women. So if you look at that green bar, you would think that that's probably about where America falls. That green bar is the average for all the countries on this list. The very last one on the bottom that has no bar with it, 0 weeks, is America. OECD countries are just, as you look, just big countries that are part of a like one group of economics. The average paid time off is 52.5 weeks at partial income. The US has 0 federally required maternity leave, which is against doctors' recommendations, for a developed country, extremely overdue to have, honestly. When there's clear benefits besides just emotional recovery from childbirth. In Norway, there was a study done in 1977 saying that after a 4 months of paid leave policy was put in, the children had lower high school dropout rates and their adult wages were increased because of allowing the mothers to keep their households more economically stable and also to provide that critical parent-to-child relationship when they were so young. Additionally, because women weren't penalized for having children, the female employment increased by 3%, and this was tracked in 9 different European countries. There's only 5 states plus DC in the US that have a paid paternal leave set in. Now, individual companies may have that, of course, private companies do, but statewide requirements, there's only 5 states plus DC that require it, and then in 2020, I think 2 more states are being put in. In California, one of the few that have that, there was also a rise in maternal employment. So you can see that there's clear benefits to having paternal leave for the children and for the parents and for the overall workforce. Having, as I mentioned earlier, equality between the sexes is it leads to overall employee satisfaction and to employment rates in general. Next slide, please. So where's paid paternal leave in the US currently? 82% of Americans support a mandatory paid leave for mothers after a birth or an adoption. 82% is a majority. This is not a bipartisan issue. Most people believe it should be there, but the reason it hasn't been implemented yet, because where the funding is going to come from for it is a partisan issue, essentially. So what the US has right now is the FMLA, the Family and Medical Leave Act. It was enacted in 1993, and it required that there be 12 weeks of unpaid leave that you could take for either a dependent's medical emergency or after childbirth, and you couldn't lose your job from it, but they didn't have to give you any payment. So for low-income workers, actually using this time is almost like imaginary. Just because you're technically allowed to do it without being fired, most people don't have the option to not have their salary being put in. So of course it's useful, but there's also a lot of standards you have to meet to be able to qualify for it. And 40% 40% of private workers don't qualify. And most of that 40% are the low-income workers, because it has to do with having a single employer for a certain amount of hours. So gig work and other jobs like that aren't qualifying. Yeah. It also offers individual rather than family leave. So when you offer individual leave, that incentivizes one parent in a dual parent household to take the brunt of the work, so that both parties aren't being put behind in their career, which historically the proportion of women who take that leave is a lot higher, which means you're perpetuating these cycles of women being in the household, just because economically it makes sense with the way the system is built. Even if in the household the father would like to take more time with the children, it's just not realistic for them. And so because of all of this, 83% of civilian workers, so that doesn't include military or agricultural careers, don't have any paid leave. So that's, like, it's an issue and we need to address it. The biggest reason right now, as I mentioned, is it's not being addressed is because who's going to pay for it? If you put a tax on employers, it's going to make the cost of hiring more workers higher, and they may not want to do it, and then that's going to hurt employment. If you put that tax on employees, that's essentially making the low-income people pay for their own leave, which is not really helping anybody. If you address it as a general tax, that requires raising taxes for everybody. When they ran the studies about how many people are in support of enacting paid leave, once it asked for a tax raise, only 53% of people supported it. But that's because it's unrealistic to tell people, oh, do you need something? Yes. Do you want to pay a whole bunch for it? Of course they're going to say no. So yeah. Next slide, please. So the next thing to talk about after sick leave is affordable childcare. So basically 68% of mothers with children under 5 years old are unemployed. And that, if you look at just social studies polls that have tried to figure out what is the reason behind this, it's not so surprisingly, not just because they don't want to be, it's because economically it is smarter for them to not be employed, because they're making more providing childcare than they would be at work, which is a really big issue. Imagine that large percentage of mothers save more money quitting their job. If you look at this graph here, you can see breaking up family income less than $2,500 versus family income more than $75,000 a year. The percentage of women who make more than $75,000 a year continue to be employed because they have the expendable income to pay for childcare. And you can see that there's a slight slant in the graph. That's because after 5 years old, you can send your children to public school, which acts essentially as daycare. So there's this change. So 44% of working mothers had an additional $6,200 in childcare expenses from working, which is 17% of the average mother's earnings. That means 17% of the group of people who are being paid less in lower paying jobs then still have to go to childcare. It's not fair, basically. And because of these numbers, women are not working because they can't. And it's, for example, in the middle skill jobs I was talking about, there's becoming these gaps in employment where they need certain trained workers who women on average have more college degrees. They need them to enter the workforce, but they're being held back. Next slide, please. So the problems with current child care policies. If you could hit next there, I have the bullet points to come up. There's 4 main problems with the way that child care policies are run currently. Because unlike paid family leave, there is some implemented, they're just not really addressing the problem. The way that they're set up and the requirements that there are to meet these subsidies end up going to households with $100,000 or more. So 40% of the child and dependent care tax credit went to families with an income above $100,000. If you have an income above $100,000, the chances that you desperately need childcare is a lot lower. So that the CDCTC is funded by $3.4 billion, and it's not really helping the issue, and it's only going to 12.5% of applicable applicants. So we need to fix this. The second main issues with the problem with current policies is subsequent increases in maternal employment. Childcare policies need to be built with several main goals in mind, instead of building separate subsidies to address each thing. Instead of building one center that's going to address maternal employment, and one center that's going to address childcare, and one center that's going to address the quality of childcare, we need to have policies that are built to address all three of these things simultaneously because of how closely interlocked these problems are. So for example, childcare subsidies in terms of vouchers increase maternal employment, but just saying, oh, these centers have reduced childcare, if women need to work at a certain time, being able to find a center that offers service when they need it versus just what's applied to everybody has been shown to lead to more maternal employment. So we need to make sure that we're actually providing help that helps. So number 3 is the quality of facilities. There's 2 different ways to judge the quality of a childcare facility, and it's the process quality features versus the structural quality features. And explaining this, like, what those mean is a whole other presentation. But could you go back, Sarah? Explaining what those 2 mean is a whole other presentation. But basically, the way that government provided facilities are judged has been shown to not correlate to student test scores, student ability, or any sort of improvements in the child's actual young childhood life. And then the final problem with the current policies is there's a lack of inclusion for students with dependents. Women are the majority of college students. Can you go to the next slide, please? Women are the majority of college students, but the largest percentage of women entering the college world are women with dependents. And they have been shown, if you look at the graph, the tiny little blue sliver of 3.5% is the amount of students with dependents that graduate with a bachelor's degree, when they are the leading reason that women have higher college graduation rates. The percentage of them graduating who try should not be so low. The main reason that this is caused from is what high schoolers apply for financial aid to go into college does not take into account students with dependents. And as women make up the majority of college students who then apply to college after the age of 25, a lot of those women do have dependents, and not including that in their financial aid has led to most women not being able to afford to continue college and then dropping out. And this ties back to the idea of middle skilled workers. If you looked at the dark green bar, those are the people that get a certificate. And you look at the women who are getting certificates and going into these middle skilled jobs have dependents. And so we need to encourage that to be happening by providing childcare to women who are students. So I'm going to pass it back off. Oh, next slide, please. I'm going to pass it back off to Ralph, and then I see that there's some questions in the Q&A that I'll address. But we're going to outline extra things that need to be addressed that we're not going to get into in this presentation, that if you'd like to go research, you can. And then Ralph is going to explain how to be a social justice advocate.
Okay, thanks, Emily. Okay, 4 more issues. One is to assure quality education. This is the second most important thing to do to help people get out of poverty. The first is increasing the minimum wage. The secondly is better educating them. We have the best higher education system in this country on a per capita basis than any other state. That's my opinion. Where we fall is in elementary and secondary education and junior colleges. We have failing schools, elementary and secondary schools, that you're just not getting a good education. You're not going to be ready to go to work or to go to college. One of Emily's slides talked about middle-level skills, jobs that require more than a diploma, but less than a college degree. And there's a lot of people out there. This is where junior colleges come in. This is where we need to make huge improvement in higher education, is at the junior college level, because they have programs to help people move into job positions. Most of them are very much into their local community, so they know what employers need. Second, enforcing civil rights laws. Obviously, we've got to enforce civil rights law against discrimination based on gender, on sexual preference, discrimination in housing, and in the workforce. Third, increasing workforce housing. You know about the housing costs here in Northern Virginia, and where we will always need people who hold minimum wage jobs, and they won't be able to afford to live here without building more workforce housing or rehabilitating apartments or houses and making them more affordable. And fourthly, low cost or no cost access to legal assistance. This is particularly important in terms of eviction court. When a case goes to the eviction court, the landlords show up with lawyers, and most of the poor people show up just by themselves, totally inadequate. We need to increase and make sure that our public defenders have plenty of money. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, now we got a lot of good ideas, and here's how you become a social justice advocate. And most people listening already know this, but listen anyway. I got some good stuff at the end. Okay, the first thing is pick what really gets under your skin. Is it a women's issue? Is it a civil rights issue? Is it what kind? Figure out what you're really interested in, okay? You might want to focus on one particular issue, or maybe you want to advocate for all social justice issues. That's fine too. Secondly, you've got to choose what level of government you want to focus on. Almost any issue that we've talked about today has a federal, a state, and a local component. For example, housing. There's federal housing programs. We have a state program for housing and local control of zoning laws and everything. It makes it a local issue too. Housing was a big issue in the election for the Board of Supervisors here in Fairfax County last year. Okay, next slide, please. After you've figured out what issues you're concerned about and what level of government, then you got to find a group to work with. It's not that you're incapable of understanding the issues, but to understand what really goes on in the legislature or the Board of Supervisors or Congress, you got to have people who follow closely to figure out what's going on. Network Nova is terrific. Other groups that I'm involved with Social Action Linking Together, SALT, the Virginia Interfaith Public Policy Center, and Virginia Democracy Forward. The Campaign for Family-Friendly Economy was one of the big backers of the whole Network Nova program, and has a lot of very good things that they do. Then you have to become an advocate. You have to help out with lobbying. You don't want to have to be a lobbyist, but you can help by researching issues, drafting papers, drafting letters, raising funds, organizing, et cetera, et cetera. Get into that group and help out with what the group's doing. Then support candidates. Now, I want Catherine to listen to this. This is not going to be academic, Catherine. You might enjoy this part of it. In the past 13 years, I've done a lot of door-to-door campaigning. In my my holiday letter in 2017, I said probably the most important thing that happened in politics in that year was the Women's March on Washington, D.C., because it started turning out tons and tons of women to get involved in politics at all levels of government. I saw this happen in 2017, when enormous numbers of women came out to run for office and to help with campaigns. We elected 13 women, 13 additional women to the General Assembly, to the House of the Virginia House in that year. I worked for Kathy Tran and Carrie Delaney. Kathy Tran decided to run for office the day that Donald Trump was inaugurated president. In 2018, we elected 2 new women to the US House of Representatives. I did a lot of canvassing in that. In 2019, we elected more women to the General Assembly. Now, Donald Trump was not actually on the ballot in any of those years, but his presence in the Oval Office helped stimulate women to get involved in politics. And 2020 is the big one. Donald Trump will lose Virginia, but Pennsylvania and North Carolina are swing states. And I would urge you to try to help in those 2 states by writing postcards, making phone calls, contributing to campaigns, maybe even do some canvassing, but that does not look like it's going to work this year. To paraphrase Dave Martinez, the manager of the Washington Nationals, more women got into the fight in 1917, continued the fight in 2017, continued the fight in 2018, continued the fight in 2019, and now it's time to finish the fight in 2020. Let's go. Thank you very much for your attention. As we pledge to answer every email that we get. We pledge to answer all your questions. At 1 o'clock, there is going to be a program featuring Congresswoman Luria. And I don't know, some people might want to go listen to that rather than listen to Emily and I. I don't understand that why, but we wanted to make that clear that there is something else to do after 1 o'clock. So how do you want to start by, you've answered some of the questions, Emily, do you want to go over those?
Yeah, sure. If you guys want to send any more questions into the Q&A, I've been trying to answer a few of them. Just to address for everybody what they've been about generally is just sort of like why are policies built the way they are. Ralph, there's 2 questions I'm struggling to answer a little bit with, but why are we asking anyone making below the poverty level to pay income taxes? By definition, they have inadequate income. The issue with that is just like, it's an issue, there's not really a good reason for it. But
that's right. They shouldn't be. If you raise the standard deduction, that eliminates a lot of people from paying any income taxes. Okay, those rates that I cited, the ones that were established many years ago, should be revised, not just on the upper end to get more money from the upper classes. And I'm talking about raising my own taxes here. You know, I'm one of those toward the upper middle class level, and probably eliminate them completely to anybody that earns less than $10,000. Okay.
Other than that, I think I typed answers to all the questions, and I think we're at time. But if anybody else has anything that's that, I think
our emails, our address are on the first slide and the last slide. So we invite you to send us written questions.
Emails in the chat.
okay.
That's the best place people can capture that right now. No, your presentation was really interesting. And I have to say some of my questions, one is race and gender, to even get the whole other intersectionality of women and women of color, and all of these also affect women differently because of that also, right? And I think COVID, with everything we talked about, is maybe going to require different policy, because I think this epidemic is just starting, and how it's affecting people getting evicted and homelessness. I think that this is going to have to be a different approach. I mean, what's your feeling on that, Ralph and Emily, that some of these ideas that were ideas from how we approached it before, globally, this is a huge issue? where it will take a lot of government intervention.
Well, you're absolutely right. What we're seeing here in the United States is a lack of government intervention
Exactly.
at the presidential level that is hurting us. I almost was going to say at the beginning of this, any statistic that you heard us quote could be totally false now because of the racial unrest and the economy going into the tank and the COVID and when somebody predicts what's going to happen, I say, well, how do you know? How do you figure that out? This has never happened before.
Right.
What kind of policy are you going to look for? What kind of situation in the past that's going to tell you what's going to happen now? We're going to have to be.
Yeah, it feels like it's going to be a lot of retraining and different things, but homelessness, I mean, people getting evicted in the future, I'm worried about. There's a great article, if anybody saw it in the Post today, about Colombia and the loss of the gains that they have made are being just women. It's all about women and wiping it out. So I'm worried about that in every country, and also globally, women and girls, since they bear the brunt of all this, with from healthcare to getting help and domestic abuse and the kind of violence that's perpetrated upon women, that we're only going to see this escalation. So I think we're going to have to revisit this topic. I would love to maybe in a few months visit back with you guys and see what's trending, and then maybe we figure out creative new ways to think outside the box to really make sure that we're addressing this disproportionate thing that's happening to girls and women. So I thank you for being here today. And I know there's a lot. Let me just show the New York Times. Some people are putting in the chat. Yeah. Oh, but I love this, Emily. Did you see this? Women-led countries are doing better in COVID.
Yeah, and also if you look at the CEO company, or not CEO companies, but big C-suite companies with women in the C-suite are proven to be more like their finances are better handled, and the amount of them that go into debt or claim bankruptcy are a lot lower, and the profit margins are a lot higher when you have women in the C-suite, just like on average. So let's elect some women into our budgeting, especially.
What you both said is women running for office, winning changes policy. They approach policy different. They govern in a way that seems to be more empathetic and understanding. And so, I think that is one big thing is women keep winning and running and winning for office, and that will be really helpful. But we're past time, and I just want to say thank you to both of you. Ralph, it's great to see you again in the room. And then Emily, we know we'll have you back again, both of you. We should catch up in a couple months. But go watch Elaine Luria next. We need to make sure Elaine wins, Abigail Spanberger wins, and Jennifer Wexton. So let's go to Stare.
We are going to wrap up our session first.
Yeah, go ahead. Throw it up, girl.
Okay, here we go. So here's their summary, and I did see that everybody got their email addresses in the chat. Thank you so much, Ralph and Emily. You guys were really just awesome. Make us proud. And what else have we got for you? Our upcoming events. So join the NARAL Pro-Choice Virginia Network Nova Virtual Book Club on choice words by abortion, writers on abortion, edited by Annie Finch. She's wonderful. And there seems to be a typo in that slide. So please join us there. And you can find more information about that on our website and or our meetup. And don't forget to shop at the Badass Boutique. This is how we are funding ourselves. Okay, we've got a new batch of postcards, so take a look at those. We've got these wonderful masks, and we've still got some of these When We Vote, We Win t-shirts, and of course we have our fabulous mugs. So with that, I think that is, oh yes, stay connected. Okay, so we're proud to have our new YouTube channel up and going with all the content from the Women's Summit experience. We've got our Twitter, we've got our Facebook, and we do continue to try to have our meetup calendar where we can post events for everyone to share. So thank you, everyone, and we'll be in touch. I know there was some a request to get the slide deck. So Emily, I hope you're happy to be able to share the slide deck. And until next time, be well. Winning is the only option.
Everybody.
Thank you.
All. See you next
Bye-bye.
time in the room where it happens.
Yeah, that's right. That was a lot of fun.
Okay.
Bye, Emily.
Bye, all.
Bye, everybody in the room. Thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Of all these